So this is perhaps the most unique aspect of Zen meditation practice, focusing on a koan. There are endless koans, but the point of a koan, very simply, is to stop the mind from wandering off, to stop the discursive mind from wandering. In other words, it's a way of locking on to what is here, kind of like an anchor, or almost like gravity pulling you in. There were many what are called natural koans that people had hundreds, a couple thousand years ago. For example, in China, it was fairly common for a child to all of a sudden be hit with the shock of non-being. Perhaps a grandmother that they love passes away, or their mother dies, or something like this. And this becomes a kind of a natural koan. Where did Granny go? Where is she? And then, of course, it starts to become, wait a minute, where will I go? It's not just about Granny, it's actually, where does everything go? And where does it come from? We realize we don't really know in our bones that, and we can't come to rest without knowing that. So this you will often see in the Chinese Zen records. Someone who became a monk or a nun or a lay person, but someone who went through Zen practice and had a deep awakening. They began as a child, just all of a sudden having to confront, for example, the death of a loved one. And then that came to become a very fundamental koan. Wait a minute. Where did I come from? And where am I going? And you realize you don't know, and yet you have a genuine need to know. I'm not talking about past lives or future lives here. I'm talking about right now, we don't know. And if we don't know now, that's how it came to me. If I don't know what I really am, who this one is that comes into being and goes out, well, I don't know anything, do I? Really? So this is one way to see how a koan begins to work. Once that really opens up for you, well, you can't think about anything else. If you need to, you can, but as soon as what needs to be done is done, you've had your meal. It didn't even really leave you then, but there is nothing else. If this is not clear, nothing is clear. This in Buddhism, you probably know, is called the one great matter of life and death, or of birth and death. It's actually the same Chinese character, life or birth. So the one great matter of life and death, or birth and death. So once the breath is really settled, ideally, your own koan kind of comes to the fore. It becomes clear. For example, who is this? This is a very common koan. Who is this? Who am I? In Korean Zen, what is this? In other words, whatever is present at the moment, what is it? Became a very basic koan. But you may, if you're interested, read, there are endless koans, but the point again is to bring all into one. Otherwise, you know what happens. The mind endlessly maybe thinks profound thoughts about emptiness or shunyata or whatever, but it doesn't really. It's going nowhere fast, as we say. So in a sense, the koan is to stop the mind in a very good way, to stop the discursive mind from wandering off. For example, looking for an answer. No, the question itself is all-consuming. This is when the koan comes to life. It becomes what we are, not just something that I think about sometimes. So, very simply, that's what a koan is. You'll read many mystical things about it, but that's what it comes down to. It's the one great doubt. This is a technical term that we call it, the great doubt. Great, it's called great for a good reason. It's not simply an intellectual wavering, or it could be this or it could be that. the one great doubt. That is, in a sense, solidifying the one great matter of life and death. And awakening is very simple. When that is resolved once and for all, that's what awakening, Buddha, the original meaning of Buddha is an awakened one. Very simply, that's what Zazen meditation, the focus is. From the breath to, we might call, the natural koan. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of set koan cases, as they're called. There are books with them in there, But if we don't cement ourselves, so to speak, to the koan, it's just usually becomes a kind of an intellectual puzzle. It doesn't become our own question, what must be made clear. Maybe I can give a simple example of a Zen exchange to show that we're talking about the same thing. This is an early Zen expression from Matsu, or Baso in Japanese. So he was one of the very early Chinese Zen masters. It's sometimes said that he was the Zen master's Zen master. He was when it started to become really natural Chinese practice. Sometimes he struck his monks, which is not very common, I think, in India. But he would strike the monks, hit them, monks or nuns, yell at them, knock them over. But of course, this was just doing anything that he could when he could see they were ready to help them see through. But this is not typical early Buddhism, doing these kinds of things. But this is something that this guy, Matsu or Baso, an early Chinese monk, 8th century, this is what he said. It's so simple. It's 4 characters, Chinese characters. The way, the true way, the Dharma, the way needs no cultivation. It's one sentence. Way needs no cultivation. This is easy to misunderstand. Oh, okay, so let's go have a beer. We don't need to do anything. It doesn't need to be cultivated. But what was all this cultivating he was talking about? So you have to listen carefully to these expressions. What he said is, way does not need cultivation, just don't defile. Just don't defile. To make dirty or to stain. It's not so easy, is it? Well, it is, and yet he goes on and he asks the monks, he says, what is defilement? And then he himself answers, and he says, when with the mind of birth and death, this craving urge to be, the mind of birth and death, he calls it. When with the mind of birth and death, we contrive, we manipulate, we try to, the discursive mind tries to make it better. Again, when with the mind of birth and death, one acts in a contrived way. You understand? Contrived. Everything is defilement. This is the radicalness of Zen. In other words, he's saying any practice you do, sitting in perfect full lotus zazen, can be defiled too. Depends if the ego self, it can defile anything it comes into contact with, is what he's saying, you see? So it sounds very easy in the beginning. It doesn't need, you don't even need to cultivate. Minor point, but don't defile. And then he explains, what is defilement? When with our contrived mind we seek to do something, to get somewhere, well, it's all defilement. And then he sums it up by saying, to directly and immediately enter the way. How? Ordinary mind is the way. You keep speaking of natural. Yeah. This is where this famous phrase, you may have heard, the ordinary mind is the way. Well, this is where it comes from. So he said, you don't need to cultivate, but don't defile. And what is defilement? Contriving to do I would like to add, or to be anything, is already a defilement. And how do you do that? Then he says literally, the everyday, the ordinary mind is the way. But he doesn't mean, again, oh, okay, well, then again, we can just go out and have a beer, right? No. That ordinary mind is free of defilement. That's truly ordinary. That's what is really ordinary. The contrived mind is not ordinary. It's anything but that. You see? It's perhaps trying to be ordinary, but that's not ordinary, is it? It cannot be contrived. So it's a very simple couple of Zen statements, but I trust you can see how it's basically saying the same thing. But you also, I hope, see how easily it can be misunderstood. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Yeah. I think just a comment. It's the same thing. Here talking about the defile, not to defile. So in Mahamudra practice, even at the beginning, when as a trainee, try to use the natural state of interaction between the subject and object, the mind and its object, simply in its natural function, rather than characterizing, imputing, differentiating, identifying. Besides simply knowing of the object coming to the thought, coming and going to the thought, if you do anything extra than that, it's defiled. Means if anything you do extra than that, you're not engaging that very natural way, that ordinary way. That mind is already using the tools of the concept, the words, the philosophy, the culture, the influence. Like such as when your eye open and see a flower, see red roses. Just knowing of, just have a notion of seeing rose is nothing. Nothing is wrong. There's no defiling in it. Just simply interacting of one natural subject, which is its quality is just to see. And the quality of the object is to be seen. And interacting these two, just in that manner, is undefiled. It's very much you seeing it is natural quality, which is not the ultimate, not necessarily the ultimate quality, but at least you're seeing the conventional natural quality, the relative natural quality. But the moment you start to, right after seeing the red rose and say, this is beautiful, is already defiled. So this is what our master is saying. The defile, and there's another word. So that's what I can relate to what the Indian Buddhist or the Nalanda Buddhist or the Tibetan mind and Buddhist tradition, try to interpret about the teaching in relation to the Mahamudra or about emptiness. The reason why is it defiled, the moment you start to interpret because the interpretation very much comes with a biasness. There's a lot of discriminations. The discrimination in the form of good and bad, liking and disliking, and that very much expressions. The very base cause which is expressing that is actually the actual defilement, the attachment or aversion, and that is very much expressed by the ignorant, and which against the real communication of a real thing, or the absolute truth, or the natural being. So that's why when we train in Mahamudra, whether it's in meditation session or post-meditation session, if you're able to, then we apply these two kind of meditation. One is called the illusional-like meditation. If you still want to interpret, then interpret this way. You see the rose, and you interpret the rose illusional-like rose. So you educate your mind. If you are unable to just settle, just simply notion of the existence of rose, and you still want to add something more, and why not you add this particular wisdom, saying it's illusional-like is rose, but it's not necessary always have to express that. This is unless your mind is not listening, not settling, just simply knowing of rose coming into your perception, and you are unable to move on to the next notion or whatever comes in your way. You're still kind of like grasping, and the interpretation itself is the grasping. You see, so then during the meditation, then simply we in the teaching it calls the space like mind emptiness meditation. You really try to choose the object of meditation, the very 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 principal object, even though there are so many objects of meditation in the emptiness, but now here you choose the subtlest object, which is the emptiness of the wisdom that seeing emptiness of others. So anyway, I just want to try to make sense try to make it similar to what you have said, where the defilement is coming from, so I can interpret this way. Thank you.